Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can I have your attention, please? As you can see, we have a serious motor vehicle accident on the front lawn of Lawrence High School. Typically, in situations like this, we have the police, we have fire, and we have EMS come to the scene. It appears to be a very serious motor vehicle accident. There's one person who is ejected from the vehicle. She's laying on top of the front hood of the vehicle. It appears the driver of that vehicle is trying to get help for her. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there's firefighters, there's EMS employees, and there's police officers on scene at this accident. Generally, the police are usually the first to respond to accidents. The police have to assess what kind of emergency equipment we need. We as police officers are trained at assessing what kind of emergency equipment that's needed. Generally, when we see a scene like this, we dispatch ambulance right away. And if we see that a vehicle or two vehicles have cars with entrapment, which means the car doors are closed, we dispatch a fire also. So all three of us can work together to solve this scene here. This is a serious motor vehicle accident. It appears as though the ambulance just covered up the young lady that's ejected from the vehicle. Since she's covered up, that means she's deceased. Once they render that she's deceased, they no longer will work on her because they have 5 other people in the vehicles to tend to. She obviously was not wearing her seatbelt, and that's exactly why she was ejected from the vehicle. The firefighters and the police officers allow the first aid squad to assess the victims. It's pretty much the first aid squad scene right now until they let us know exactly what they have with the victims. They've got to check the victims' pulses. They've got to check the victims' necks. They've got to check the victims' wounds. And they have to assess each victim as to who is going to survive and who is not going to survive. That seems a little gruesome, but when you have a life or death situation, the first aid squad, the MS has to assess who can they save and who can they not save. So obviously, the young lady that's on the hood of the vehicle, they already deemed her that they could not save her. She's been rendered that she's deceased. As the first aid squad's working, the firefighters are also working to see how they can get the people out of the vehicles. This weather is very tricky. When we have rain, or we have snow, or we have sleet, or we have ice, the weather is a big factor in what we're doing out here. Okay? If the weather does not cooperate with us, the scene could be lost. If the weather does not cooperate, we could lose our scene. Generally, we want to preserve as much evidence that there is. Our police officers are looking for someone being drunk. Is there a drunk driver there? Is there somebody there texting and driving? Are there any beer cans in the cars? Are there any alcohol bottles in the cars? Is there any marijuana, any other drugs in the vehicles? Those are all things that we have to assess. If we don't assess those, we could lose valuable evidence. As you can see, there's approximately 20 to 25 emergency workers at one accident scene. If there's a more serious accident, which we've had up to 50 to 60 to 70 emergency workers at once. It takes a lot of cooperation between the police, the fire, and the EMS to coordinate this, to make sure that everybody in those cars that can be saved is saved. It appears as though the fire company has taken their hydraulic equipment out, which means they're going to cut the roofs of the cars off. In order to get the victims out safely, sometimes they do have to cut the roofs off so that the EMS workers can access the parties inside the vehicle safely. The EMS workers are going to make sure that everyone is 100% safe in the vehicle, and by what I mean by saying that is, if they have a neck injury, the EMS workers cannot move them until their necks are stabilized. So sometimes it's a lot easier for the fire department to cut the roofs of the vehicles off and then move the parties. As you can see, they have one party out of the vehicle already. They're going to be rendering first aid to this party. It appears as though this young lady is very seriously injured. In coordination with the injuries, the fire department and the EMS and the police also have to assess, do we need to have a helicopter fly in? If we need to have a helicopter fly in, we need to contact the helicopter immediately, and we have to find a safe place for the helicopter to land. If a helicopter was going to land here at Lawrence High School, we could probably choose the football field. It's a very safe landing zone. We could probably choose the fields alongside Gainsborough Road, a very safe landing zone. The helicopter has to be able to land safely and be able to take off safely without any obstruction whatsoever. But when we're talking about the helicopter is also a tricky issue, because if it's too windy, if it's too rainy, if it's too stormy, they cannot fly in that type of weather because they're going to put everyone else's health at risk. Luckily for us here in Lawrence Township, we have the hospital named Capital Health Systems at Fuld. Helene Fuld Hospital is about 3 miles down on Brunswick Avenue. That's a level 1 trauma center, which means they are skilled, they are trained to deal with any type of situation we have. Any injuries that we possibly have, they are trained. They have trauma doctors and trauma nurses on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So our EMS workers, they're doing CPR on that one party there. It appears as though that party's not breathing. They have a bag mouth valve on them. They're trying to get the party to breathe again. All the while, the firefighters and the police are still investigating the scene. The firefighters are still attempting to cut the roofs off the vehicles so they can access the other parties. We now have 2 people having CPR done on them. When you see CPR being done, it's a very, very, very critical situation where if they're not breathing within a minute or 2, they could lose their life. All of our EMTs are highly trained, skilled professionals who know exactly how to handle situations like this. The EMS workers now using she just shocked the person, okay? She just shocked the person with an ADT, okay? That's just a defibrillator device. That will jumpstart your heart. If you're not breathing, that defibrillator device will jumpstart the heart. And when that happens, you know somebody's very critically injured. If we don't have that defibrillator on that person, almost immediately, they could lose their life. So when you see that happening, somebody is very critically injured. They're still doing CPR on the one victim. Both victims are actually getting CPR. They're trying furiously to save 2 parties there, their lives. All the while, the police department's job is going to be to figure out what exactly happened in this incident. The police department's going to look for witnesses. Is there anybody that saw this accident take place? Is there anybody inside the vehicle they can talk to very quickly to tell us exactly what's happened? And one of the major components that we need to know as a police department is, are there anybody, or is there anybody in a vehicle that has been using drugs? If there's anybody in the vehicle that's addicted to drugs or high on marijuana, cocaine, anything like that, we need to know that. It appears as though they just covered up a second victim. Now we have 2 deceased parties. So we have a double fatal accident so far. When somebody dies in a vehicle, it's a crime. We as a police department investigate this as almost like it's a homicide. It's a crime that 2 people have died. So we have to investigate this scene as if it's a homicide. 2 people are deceased. We have to cover up make sure we get all the evidence and preserve all the evidence from the scene to ensure that we have enough information that we can build a court case against somebody, investigate this case properly. The one party there is still laying down, she's still getting CPR done on her. She's extremely critical. The fire department is attempting to remove the one driver out of the vehicle. Looks like the one driver of the vehicle is partially ejected. As you can see, he can't get out of the vehicle there because he's partially ejected. He must not have been wearing a seatbelt either. I can't tell you how important it is for everybody in the vehicle, not only passengers, drivers, plus it's the law to wear a seatbelt inside that vehicle. The vehicle that's facing us already had one person ejected and she's deceased. The second person, he's stuck there because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt and he's partially ejected. When you have ejection, you most likely have neck injuries. You most likely have head injuries. We don't know if it's brain trauma. He's still trying to get his friend to wake up. He's awake, but he's feverishly, he doesn't realize that his friend is deceased. A lot of times when we deal with these trauma situations, there's shock that sets in. When shock sets in, people don't realize what's going on. The heart rate lowers down. They don't realize what's going on. He still does not realize that his friend is deceased. This is a memory that he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life. It's not a good memory. The fire department is trying furiously to remove him from the vehicle as soon as possible. This young man has to watch as his friend, whether it's a regular friend or a girlfriend or whoever, is being covered up and not ever going to be seen again by anybody else. It appears as though all the occupants of one of the vehicles is out. The fire company safely cut the roof of the back vehicle off and all the occupants are taken out. As you can see, they are now covering up the young man who's partially ejected from the vehicle. That is for his safety. That is for his safety. He's not deceased. That is for his safety so that he gets no particles or glass or anything on him or in his eyes or in his ears or anything like that. So they have covered him up for his safety. The young lady laying there, they are not going to remove her until the police investigation is complete. She's deceased. Same thing with the other party that's laying there on the ground. That party is not going to be removed from the scene until the police conduct their investigation. A part of the problem here, especially with social media, we have families arriving at scenes now. We have family members arriving at scenes, and it's very difficult to contain crying, grief-stricken families from scenes. There's people there who are texting families, sending Facebook messages to families about what happened to their loved one. And it's very difficult to contain a scene when we have family members running around. Something we do not want a family member to see is their family member who's in the vehicle deceased. We do not want them to see their relative laying like that. As you can see, there's a grief-stricken mother. She just ran up. The grief-stricken mother just ran up. Our officer there is not going to let her onto the scene. Our officer there is not going to let her on the scene. He's not going to let her onto the scene. The problem that we have as a police department, we do not want relatives to see their family member the last time they see their family member in that state. Okay? Our officer must show compassion. He must show grief towards the family. One of the hardest parts of our job is to let a family member know that their loved one is not coming back home that night. And it's very hard to contain a loved one from running to a car, from being near the scene. Okay? That loved one wants to see their relative because they want to see if they can help their relative out any way possible. But the EMS has already decided that she's deceased. So we cannot allow that relative to our scene. It's technically a crime scene now. The police are going to preserve every piece of evidence. Not until this scene is 100% safe will the police start doing their investigation. They do measurements. They take pictures. They interview witnesses. Most of the time, a tow truck will not even be called to a scene, and a road will be shut 100% down until after we deem that it's safe and we deem that our investigation is complete. The fire company appears as though they're just wrapping up their final steps in securing these vehicles to make sure that they're safe for the police. A lot of times they'll take the battery cables off so that the battery is not, or the engine is not able to be started, so that in case the engine is still running, that it'll be shut down. We want to all work together and make sure that everyone is safe at the scene. I didn't realize there still is one victim in the back car there. They must have been laying down before. There is one victim. That person is still alive. They're containing their head. As you can see, there's a couple firefighters in the back holding their head to make sure that their neck is not going to bend in any which way to paralyze them in case their neck is broken or in case that they do have a neck injury. With the roof of the vehicle off, as you can see, the firefighters, the EMTs, and the police can contain that vehicle a lot easier and enter the vehicle a lot easier to make sure that somebody's safe. As soon as they have that person taken out of the vehicle, they're going to assess and they're going to let the EMTs know exactly what we need to do with the party there. As you can see, there's 7 firefighters / EMTs right around that body there that's being removed. They're still alive. They're going to remove them off the scene, and they're going to do as much first aid as they possibly can. And again, as you can see, sometimes it might take 6, 8, 10 emergency workers to lift somebody up, depending on their size, their weight, things of that nature. When someone is injured badly and their body is very limp, even though they're still alive, their body is full weight. It's extremely difficult to carry somebody who's full weight. And the EMTs are now assessing that party to see exactly what kind of medical attention they need. It appears as though they put an IV in that party. They assess the party and they decide that party needs fluids inside them, whether it's medication, whether it's water, whether it's saline. They assess the situation and it appears as though the EMTs have a line run into their vein that is giving them some type of fluid to make sure that they can survive. They're going to assess the situation as much as they possibly can, and they're going to remove that person to their ambulance as fast as they possibly can so they can get them to the hospital and get them the proper care. When you have an accident scene like this, there's several different injuries that you can have to your body. You can have head and neck injuries. You can have internal injuries. You may not feel bad. You may not feel like anything besides a blow to the stomach, but your spleen could be ruptured. Your ribs could be broken. Your liver could be sliced. it's imperative that we, as emergency workers, get you to the hospital as soon as we possibly can to get you seen so that they can evaluate you. When you're taken to Capitol Health Services at Fold, the trauma nurse and doctor, they're going to assess exactly what you have wrong with you. They're going to look and see if your stomach starts raising. If your stomach starts raising, that most likely means that they have blood in their stomach. If they have blood in their stomach, it's a serious situation. One of our fire companies has cleared their scene. We try not to keep everybody in the scene for too long, because if we do, it crowds the scene up. As soon as the fire department's job is done, a lot of times they will clear the scene. The fire company, they're a valuable resource to everybody else because they have lights on their trucks. We've had hundreds and hundreds of accidents in the dark, in the pitch dark of night. The fire company will come out with lights and light the scene up. It appears as though we have a third deceased person. They tried their hardest to save that party, but there's a third deceased person. So we have 6 people in the vehicles, 3 are deceased. So right now that's a triple vehicular manslaughter case. We as police now have to investigate 3 deaths instead of 2. The fire company is now clearing the scene, and it's the police department's job to investigate the crime now. It's their job to take pictures. It's their job to take measurements. It's their job to ensure that these 3 deceased parties are preserved 100% sure, to make sure we can identify them, to make sure that they're properly taken care of in a humane way. We will make sure they get to the hospital. They must go to the hospital first. They cannot be picked up by anybody else besides the hospital workers. They must go to the hospital. They must be, blood must be drawn from their bodies to ensure that they have no type of medical conditions, to ensure that they have no type of drugs and alcohol in their system. That's all part of the investigation. The police department is now coning off the scene, as we usually do in a fatal accident, to make sure that nobody else can enter this scene. When we have scenes like this, it's very important that we know who's inside of our scene, because there's something called trace evidence. We don't want trace evidence in our scene. Trace evidence is what we bring into the scene. Okay? We want to try to limit the amount of trace evidence that comes into the scene, because let's just say we find a marijuana cigarette on the ground. We want to make sure a bystander wasn't standing there smoking a marijuana cigarette while on scene. We want to make sure that that marijuana cigarette is part of our scene. As you can see, they broke off the area any way they possibly can. Generally, we'll put cones out. Generally, we'll put the caution tape to trees, to telephone poles, anything we can get the caution tape to investigate this scene, we do. Police investigations like this take hours upon hours. Generally, if I had to tell you, it's probably a 4 to 5 hour investigation before we find out exactly what happened here, collect the witnesses, and leave this scene. As you can see, we have uniformed patrol officers out there. We'll call in detectives. We'll call in help from the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office. They have a fatal accident scene crew. They'll take pictures with advanced cameras. We work together to try to recreate this traffic accident as much as we possibly can. As you can see, we have 3 deceased members of the Lawrence Township community laying out there. Hopefully, somebody wasn't drinking and driving. Hopefully, somebody wasn't texting and driving. Because if they were, there's severe consequences. Sometimes we won't know for hours upon hours. Sometimes we won't know for weeks upon weeks exactly what happened. But I would say 99% of the time we find out exactly what happened through witness statements and through the use of technology, through the use of looking at cell phones to see if there's point of impact, when the point of impact was, if somebody was texting at that same time. Right now, I'm going to turn this over quickly to Chrissy Evans. She is the chief of our EMS department.
What'd you think? Any ideas? What'd you think? Did it? Were you? You know, we have a lot of fun coming here and doing this for you guys. Excuse me. But this is actually very real. Hello? Can you hear me now? This is actually very, very real. I mean, it's all fun and games, and it's fun to come out here and watch us do this stuff. We have a lot of fun coming out here and doing this stuff for you guys. But I've been doing this for over 30 years. And the reality of seeing something like this and seeing kids your age go through this with a motor vehicle accident like this, where you have 2 car fulls of kids and over half of them are dead, and there's nothing we can do about it. You can prevent that. Just be smart about it. You guys are going to do what you want to do, no matter how much us adults tell you, don't drink and drive, don't go out partying, don't do drugs, don't do this. But you know what? I was your age too. You get it up in your head, you're going to do what you want to do. By doing this, we hope that we are giving you a little bit of sense of reality that this can actually happen. This is real life. And you may not be the one that dies. You may not be the one that gets hurt. You could do it to somebody else. And then for the rest of your life, that's what you have to deal with. We had, how many was it? 6 patients here. One was immediately dead, was ejected right through the windshield, almost decapitated. That's real. The other ones we worked on as long as we possibly could, and there was nothing that we could do for them. You saw the parent that came out here that was freaking out. These are your parents that are going to have to deal with this. So, without being too overly serious, I just hope that we really drove the message home to you that this can actually happen to you. It can happen to the person next to you. Just be smart. If you need help, if you need a ride home, call somebody to come and get you. It's that easy. I hope you guys enjoyed the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Chief Michael Bird from the Station 22 Fire Department, Lawrence Road Fire Company.
Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone learned a good lesson here. Just to show you just to talk about briefly what we did. We cut the cars away from the individuals that were trapped inside the vehicle. And it's like a giant can opener with the tools that we use. So we exposed the vehicle away from the patients to extricate them. We work with the EMS and the police to get the critical care needed to the patients within 60 minutes, called the golden hour, so they get to the hospital. Usually most MVAs have trauma, so that's why we do this. I've seen a lot of stuff for the last 23 years, young and old, but please, I know you're at the beginning of your lives. Please do not drink and drive. You know, I graduated from this very same high school 25 years ago. So please, you're the future of this country. Take care of yourself, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson that we had today. Stay safe.